Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. After a long hibernation, we have with us again Dr. Hema Hari and Dr. D.K.Hari, and we're going to be talking about how India's history, at least to the west and perhaps even inside India, is so distorted because you need to understand where things went awry so that you can start putting the corrective process. All this is going to be discussed today, a very, very important talk, in my opinion, and you will love this presentation from Hema Hari and D.K. Hari ji. And let's welcome our guest today, Dr. Hema Hari, Dr. D.K. Hari. Namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Namaste, namaskaram.
Good to be back on your show.
Thank you so much, sir. The pleasure is all mine. So, viewers, this thing stumbled when I was talking to somebody else in the United States about how come India's history is so distorted to the outside world. And they said, oh, it's because there's this one guy called James Mill who wrote the history of British India in 1818, 1818. And this is a 3-volume thing. And it took him 10 years to write it. And guess what? He was also a colleague of Lord Macaulay and the then East India Company director, all the other people, governor generals and things like that. So all this stuff is how you have this distorted version of history that is in vogue today. In fact, the lumpens like, what's that name? The professor in Rutgers University, they all swear by it because it's very convenient to browbeat India with that. Unfortunately, the Marxists who set out the writing the India's history in India, they also made the same mistake. They also went to the same thing. So we are going to connect the dots here. In fact, rather, I'm not going to connect the dots. The two good doctors here are going to connect the dots. I yield the floor to you, Dr. Hema-Hari, Dr. D.K.Hari. I yield the floor to you. You have a presentation, I believe. So why don't you go ahead and start? And I might interject once in a while, but the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for this. It's actually a very interesting subject because when we speak about the history of India being distorted, which many people have said, I thought we should go to understand the root where it happened and why it happened and how it happened. I think when we ask these questions, we naturally get answers for this. For example, the first thing we could probably say is one of the early observers on this has been the different viceroys of who have come to India, the governor generals and all of them. So we look sort of comments by some of the early ones, and then we'll go on to James Mill, obviously. James Mill, Charles Perrott, obviously, we'll go on to them as we go along in the show. But we'll start with this person by name, Lord Curzon.
Yeah, so go ahead and start the presentation, please.
Yeah, just doing that.
Yeah.
Just a moment. We're just setting the screen, please.
Yeah.
So here is a quote by Lord Curzon, where he says, India has left a deeper mark upon history than any other terrestrial unity in the universe. Powerful empires existed and flourished in India while Englishmen were still wandering in the woods. This indeed is a very powerful statement to be made by a British officer in India, and that was a very senior officer. So he compares the two, the flourishing empires of India as well as that England, which they did not have for millennia then. That's what he says. And this was followed to this, there were quite a few German and French scholars, colonial. They're all heaping praise on Indian thought. And this, for the directors of East India Company, which was then moving from a trading post to a ruling entity, ruling power. For them, it was obviously they felt this would weaken their position as rulers of India, because if you have to rule a land, you must be superior in some ways, not just militarily, which they were slowly getting their toehold on into India. So they were trying to do this. So they had to think of some other ways of doing this. At the same time, they also had Warren Hastings, who was very good in administration, who was, by his own words, by the words of Colonel Alexander Walker, who is
Who?
also got the sobriquet of
Butcher of Saurashtra.
and he says this, that the Warren Hastings was wicked, mischievous, and disingenuous. Impossible to pardon his.
Tergiversations, unmeasurable extent of his revenge or gratification, worst passions of nature. So Colonel Alexander Walker, who himself is referred to as the butcher of Saurashtra, he himself is calling Warren Hastings so mischievous, wicked, and merciless, so much of revenge. And that Warren Hastings, imagine, and he became the Governor General of India, and he has praise for Indian morality and literature. And as far as the British were concerned,
see, there are 2 points. One, he had a major role in capturing India for the East India Company. At the same time, the same directors of East India Company, while they gave him that post, in spite of all his well-known not so good qualities, they also considered him Brahminized because he had learned these moral values from the people of India, from natives. So they considered him Brahminized. So they came up with this term Brahminized then. So today, now a lot of Brahmin beating goes on, but let's see the origin of that term Brahminized. That's where it starts.
So when he praises the Indian morality and literature, they term him as Brahminized.
So that's where the term actually starts, we should know. So this follows, there was a debate in England on the high morality of Hindus. This debate happened among the officers who came back from India then.
So they found that all these people, after serving their term, when they were coming back to Britain, they were starting to praise the high morality of the Hindus, and they were starting to get aligned with these values as well.
So actually, 30 different officers of then high repute presented papers, each over 100 pages, on what was then they called the high morality of the Indians, the natives. And collectively, these 30 officers were called, they came up with the phrase in this debates as the Brahminization of the Englishman. Look at the way the word Brahminization starts stepping into the dialogue, the narrative. All this happens about 200 years ago.
So those people who were beginning to get aligned with the dharmic values of the Bharatiya civilization, they were beginning to be called as Brahminized.
So it happened. So this, for the Board of Control of East India Company, for them, they opined it was very injurious to them because it was injurious to the psychology of the British officer who was to rule India, because they would then have a perceived inferiority complex in their minds, which will not allow them to execute the rule of the natives and capture more territory. So what this necessitated for them was, they got these people, James Mill and Charles Grant, as you mentioned in the introduction, they were appointed in 1808 to write the history of India for the British officers.
So the administrators of British India, who would come from Britain to India to rule, for those administrators, actually this forms the route even for our administrative services.
The Indian Administrative Service, which was earlier called the Imperial Administrative Service. This is where the roots are from 200 years ago.
So they used to be trained before coming to India. So they felt that there was a necessity. So just the way we give cultural training to people when they travel abroad for work today. So they said people, besides culture, they have to be trained in the history of India. So they wrote a separate syllabus, and a syllabus which was written in such a way that certain doctrination could happen. Indoctrination could happen to the minds of these British administrators.
And look at this. This is written by Charles Grant. These words. This formed part of the parliamentary papers of Britain. That's important. And it was included in the syllabus of Haileybury College.
This was the college where those administrators would get trained.
And this was to be given to them before their appointment to India. So they're trained here. It was to create a mental orientation for them. And one of the key things that are repeatedly emphasized in this mental orientation is everything in India was inferior to theirs, meaning the British. And look at this. It's all about what you'd say within quotes, mental orientation. That was what the whole purpose was. And And this is the colonization mindset we're talking about, which started then, is continued for 200 years and a decade more now. So when James Mill, he writes his 3-volume effort, it's actually a 12-year effort in which he states very clearly, he doesn't hide it, nothing to be proud of in Indian past. Hindu thought is trash. Sanskrit is no language at all. Sanskrit, artificial language. Sanskrit language was created by Brahmins to have superiority over society. Look at this. Actually, none of this is actually true. But for him to create that mental orientation, this was a fundamental base, the foundation on which he built the whole history of India, 3 volumes. It is a 12-year effort. The next slide, please. And then look at what he says in this. Next page. In his preface to the, look at the beauty of this, James Mill, in his preface to this very same book. See what he writes there. His conscious decision to write history of India without learning any Indian language and without ever visiting India. That is what. So neither Macaulay nor James Mill, who had substantial influence over India, neither of them visited India. At least Macaulay learned the language Sanskrit. James Mill refused to learn any of the Indian languages and refused to visit, but still he wrote the history that has held the minds, that colonized the minds, because that's what he wanted to do for the next 200 years and a decade more since. So look at this. So it's, and he didn't want it to be biased, because he said he doesn't want to be biased because by the closeness to the subject matter. So without, today you use the term subject matter expert because you are close to the subject. Here he said, no, I want to be subject matter expert, but without being close to the subject. Look at the contrast. In contrast, you see, to James Mill's way of handling writing the history of India, 800 years prior to his time, that is about 1000 years before present, Al-Biruni, who came with Muhammad of Ghazni, he also wrote a book called Kitabul Hind, that is the history of India, where he traveled extensively over India, many towns, cities, villages. He learned the language Sanskrit and then wrote Kitabul Hind. So probably from James Mill time, if we go back 800 years, Al-Biruni himself would have been puzzled by the research methodology that James Mill has adopted 800 years later. Isn't it? Is it puzzling? That's the beauty of. So this was the basis for what we today have, the colonial policy, and from which flowed the education system. That is the root of this James Mill's history of India. And look at this. Mill's view, the Indian decimal notations, which is what is actually ruling the world now in the field of mathematics, decimal, which comes from the Indian word dashamlag, for decimal dot. He says it's no arithmetic at all, no math, because the Indian, what we today call the Arabic numerals is actually Indian numerals. All of us know that, the 1 to 9 and the number 0 as the Arabs called it. He says there are no notations at all, they're just hieroglyphs. Because for him, hieroglyphs then were just mumbo jumbo. That's all it was. And he said the Aryabhata text, which most mathematicians today revere and look up to across the world, he said it's just a mere fabrication of the 19th century. Like this, he's made a list of points in this interview, just giving 1 or 2 key points that he has expressed. And look at this, these European writers. For example, if you go to England, the Bowden chair is supposed to be the most popular chair where people aspire to go there, to be in the Bowden chair. The Macaulay, Max, look at it, all of them have contributed each in a particular work. Macaulay focused on how to break down the education system. Max Muller worked on the core, that is the Veda, and Bowden on how to bring it out. And obviously, he was one of the big proponents of the Aryan invasion theory. So all these 3 points, very clear, each one took up one perspective, but they're all, as you said, co-joined at the base. That is what we need to understand in this. Just show you one more slide. A moment, please. So parallel to that, a little beyond that, here's a person, German scholar by the name Hegel, a German scholar, who said Indic civilization thoroughly unhistorical and lacking historicity. So that's what he said. See how there was this parallel thought with a few German scholars and a few British scholars. And they said India does not have its own history except repeated aggression. So these were the thoughts that they kept on bringing forth, and they call them pagans, obviously. This is the term that Karl Marx used, and they call it semi-barbaric. They have to repeat it. Why did he make this statement? The point we should understand, yes, he made the statement. That's a fact. It's well recorded. But the point is, what is the lineage he comes from? Which warrants the statement from Karl Marx is what we should understand. That's when we'll understand their mental orientation with which we can express better. See, this is the key point here, which we were able to sort of unearth and come through in a sequence. So there is James Mill. He is not an ordinary person. He's a director of East India Company, one of the largest, biggest, most profitable money-making machines of the world then. He was the second highest official of EOI. So he was not a small official. He was not a small man. He was a very big man in England. And how big is the question? He is a founding member of University of London. So not only was he having money, he also wrote the history over a 12-year effort without knowing the Indian languages, without ever visiting India. Like he wrote the British history, history of British India, and he was also a founding member of the University of London. So education. So he had education in his hand, he had money in his hand, he had the audacity to write the history of British India without knowing anything about it. And his student is George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, we just now saw. So he obviously is parroting this. And who is the student of Hegel? Karl Marx. So he is getting it from, so Karl Marx, where is he getting his knowledge of India? Because his work was more socialism. Where did he get his knowledge of India? From his teacher, Hegel, who in turn got it from James Mill. And that is how it is from Karl Marx, the Marxist ideologies develop, and all the colonial historians of India develop thereon and come through. So here we see a clear sequence, because unless we see how the flow happens, the sequence happens, we'll not be able to understand where the issue is. Because we can hear and a whole lot, which we have been doing, but we should also know where their roots are, where they come from. And this is what helps us, gets us to nail what the problem is. So the intention of the problem, because today you should not unnecessarily blame anybody without knowing what their intention is, what their source is. That help us nail it, and equally importantly, tell them what their issue is, so that they should also know what's the lineage they're coming from, going all the way the root, and why it is, and why is it they use the term Brahminization repeatedly as a flogging a horse, flogging a dead horse, whatever. So these are the key points I think we thought we could share with you in this session, which with all of interest to all your viewers too. Yes, sir.
Before we go to this slide, just give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second. Before we go to that slide, Hemaji, I have a question for you. It appears to me that a handful of individuals were instrumental in orienting the mindset of a small, marauding nation called England. And all in the time, they were also waging wars against Napoleon. Napoleon was considered stronger, if you see that. And my question is, how is it that with a small group of people they could manage to get this control over such a large land as Bharat?
Yeah, see, fundamentally, actually, two things come out very clear in this whole flow. One is they were not trying to influence the mind of the British in Britain alone. Fundamentally, they were picking this subset of Englishmen who would be coming to India as administrators. So they were the first group of people who were being brainwashed and mentally oriented as to India being inferior to every other civilization, especially Britain. That's point number one. So they were very, very focused and trained. They were not dissipating their energies on entire Britain. They were selecting these administrators and drilling it into them. Now, when these administrators come here, look at what these are the people who are going to actually be forming the policies, the laws, the rules, the do's and don'ts. And it is through that that you can control the entire population. So fundamentally, it is coming down, boiling down, to while education system and what you teach is one aspect. But if you start drawing, the people who draw the boundaries, once they start drawing it based on a certain mindset, then how is the flock of sheep going to go outside this gate, outside this fence? They are going to be controlled and curtailed within the fence alone. So they were very clear that those who draw the fence have to be oriented in this mindset. So which is very, very important. That's why we keep telling again that while we work on the administrative system, I mean, while we work on education, culture, and all these aspects, fundamentally, if we have to decolonize our minds, it has to again start with the Indian administrators of the present. So the current people who are current administrators and who are going to become administrators for the future, they have to again start understanding the glory of the Bharata civilization and not get fenced in with this colonial version of Indian history.
Which
So
is,
administrators are the first point from where the flow will start.
look at how they used it. They knew where to put the pincer to bleed the land of not just its value and wealth, but also of its pride, knowledge, and all that flows along with it. So the knowledge, so they used that, and they knew what to. Apart from one was obviously the monetary gains. To the brain, they knew how to. They did that. They knew how to capture the brain. Look at this again here. Shema put up 3 slides. I want to show those 3 slides. Very important.
You can put it up.
Yeah, thank you. See again there are
One.
Yeah. Look at these 3 key people again. Robert Clive, who politically, through wars, both here in the Carnatic as well as in Bengal, he went on to become the rule important portions of India, because for them, the Coromandel coast for the colonists, early colonists, was very important because there was a fertile area from which a lot of trade happened. So the Coromandel coast.
And Robert Clive is a person who actually shifted gear for them from trade into rule.
Yes.
With his first Battle of Plassey and winning all of that.
So he got Bengal too, another very prosperous part of India for them. So those two were very important. So that shifted the political thing. And William Jones, who was then a judge in the Calcutta High Court, they called it Calcutta High Court, then in the early stages. So he worked on the cultural aspects, the nuances of it, and where he brought in their indoctrination points, etc. Very clearly he brought it because he learnt it from a local Sanskrit scholar, was living some 40 miles up north, went there and then met him and got it. Similarly, then Macaulay, he worked on it to give it a structure. So each one built on the other very clearly, assiduously. So while there were people in England working on it, there are people in India working on it for them, from both. So they got the land grab happened quite often by dubious means in present day terms. Then it also happened cultural grab. And then the third thing was educational grab. Then they not only did that, they had the infusion points to it, like the British history of India, the Marxist ideology, everything. So this is apart from what you call the evangelists that happened in the actually happened first started off in the periphery and slowly moved in. So look at it, it's actually a multi-pronged attack coming one after another, decade after decade, from on both fronts. That is what led to an overall internal collapse also. That's a key point that we should note here. Thank you.
One question before we move on to the next slide. Hemaji, I'll ask you. See, these people were only a mere 20,000, if I remember correctly. The British, the white man that landed in India, often was 17 years old, and he was a collector who would go within his district from place A to place B to place C to place D. And while he was going to place A, the place B tent would be all set up. And then he will spend some time here, dispense justice, do whatever other things, and then go to place B. And then rule there, C, D. And this is horseback mostly, and also all those, pallak and all that stuff. My question is, with such a sparse number of people, even assuming they could get an army of Indian soldiers, how were they able to, like eradicate the Gurukul system, completely eradicate it? And then they nationalized water. So many things that happened. How could they effectively enforce this thought process into such a vast country as India?
Yeah. So fundamentally, again, it boils down to who has the power. So if you're going to eradicate or introduce or do anything, you need to have the power. And how did they go about getting their power? It's very beautiful, how they've done it very strategically. If you look at it, their power, yes, they grew their army slowly and then they piggybacked on the Indian army. They recruited Indians. In fact, Madras is the place where the Indian army, the army as such for the British was first formed, and the seeds for an Indian army itself was sowed in Madras on the banks of the river Adyar, actually. And so that's one side of the story. You can get an army to fight for you and all that, but what they did very smartly is, because since they came in for trade, and it was not just they were also the French, they were the Portuguese, they were the Dutch, and all of them had come for trade. And this entire Coromandel coast was their first target. And from there on, if you really look at it, if you start looking at the Indian history, you come across so many places where you find kings against wars with one another. Small territories, the chieftains, they are at war with each other. And very often we tend to think that, we start wondering, why were all these people fighting together against one another? Many of these, if you look at it, were because of trade alliances. So these trade alliances, and to hold them, they use this army, and with that, they get the power. So that's how they slowly kind of start bringing in their divide and rule, as well as conquering. So trade also helps them get start fighting and capturing regions, getting the power there, with which then they start introducing or eradicating systems.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Hemaji, you don't need to remove the slide deck. You can leave it there. We can control the screen from our side. You just say we can stop it and we'll do it. So go ahead. You have to continue with the presentation.
Yeah. So see, you made a good point. Look at this. The administrative service system they brought into not only India, they brought it into Australia, they brought it to Canada, all their colonies, wherever, because they were very clear that these people, whoever it is, carries through the same orders, irrespective of whether they are 20 years old or they're 30 years old or 40 years old, and they could be transferred anywhere. They could be transferred to Canada or to Australia or to India or any other place, Africa, anywhere. So they created an orientation platform and then a system by which they could be moved around. So that is how, while the Indian armies won major battles to make Britain great and say that the sun never set on the British Empire, all because of British Indian armies with a few generals of their British origin. The same time, what kept it sustained for them was the administrative service in each of these places, for which they had set their indoctrination. The narrative was set for. That was the key point. I think that should be the key takeaway. And the process, how it came about. We should be the 4-step process. So these are the key takeaways that should have that. They could transfer a person straight away from Quebec to Sydney and then retransfer them back to Madras or to Kanpur anyway. So they had that. So they created a huge flexibility. So when each individual was movable and need not stay or for longer time, for just 3 years, 5 years in a place, they created a system that actually administered the world economy for more than a couple of centuries. That was actually a marvel. While we can say what they did were not the right things, the good things, the dharmic things, they actually did it for more than 2 centuries. And they did it from their perspective successfully. And it could have been very powerful, brutal, rapacious, and all this. And actually, we don't have used those words. Colonel Alexander Walker has used it of Warren Hastings. So all those English words he's used what they are. So, but the point is, it was effectively implemented not just by one Warren Hastings or one Alexander Walker, but by hundreds and thousands of them in the different colonies of the world, in the different provinces of India, and the different districts within these provinces in India. So that was the beauty, the strength, which is what they did, and it was actually crushing blow. They did this not in one field. They did this in the field of navigation. They did this in the field of trade. They did this in the field of education, in mindset training. Every one of the fields was replicated. So not only look at this, they replicated not only in different fields, they replicated across provinces, across countries, across continents. And all this, they had a seed backend. It was built 200 years ago, 250 years ago.
With the training in the Hellebury College,
So
the training for administrative officers. So that forms the key. So if you get that right, then you can get the whole plot correct.
So if when we're looking at India going forward and becoming a sort of Vishwaguru, which we rightfully should claim that place, it should not just be adage, but it should be a thing that can be implemented. That for that, our mindset training is important. We don't have to have that, what you call the Brahminization, de-Brahminization, colonization, non-colonization. No. You know what is right. There again comes the important aspect of questioning and looking for the right answers. The indoctrination process anywhere does not allow questioning. You cannot, you're only indoctrinated, means you're told, just follow it. That's the process of indoctrination. That's what they followed. Whereas the Indian Dharmic thought is always the idea of questioning, because this is a big world with so many openings. Today, social media has opened up, everything is opened up like this. So the tool that we could use is use the ideas and methods, but the tool is today, the key aspect is ask questions to yourself and ask questions of the events and flow. That will create a totally change in mindset, that will create a change in approach, how we can carry it out. Because that is what, and our traditional Bharata, Vedic, Indian, Dharmic thought is to ask the questions. Our civilization was prosperous because for millennia we asked the right questions. So it is a skill to ask questions. That's why Tarka was part of our style of operation. And we also had one, you had Tarka, other you had was what? Kutarka. You could ask questions not to get answers, not to educate or not to carry forward a job, but just to sake of questions. So to say, I also know some question or I know some answer. No, that's why it's called Kutarka. The way forward is no ask, because that sharpens you to act, to use your intellect, which all of us have a lot of. So that is when, so that you have to have a new methodology for going forward in 2030, 2040, 2050, and 2100 and beyond. So that is where, see, these things, they are minor shifts, but they make major differences over decades and centuries to come. I think India should look at it seriously, because we have today the strength to carry it out.
Well, one thing that I have noticed, and it's not just the history that has been done along the British lines. Today, the district collector in, say, Tamil Nadu has certain set of powers, whereas the same district collector in, say, Uttar Pradesh has also got a district magisterial powers. He can be a district magistrate. The same is not true in Tamil Nadu cadre. Tamil Nadu, there is much more, it's got some bounds to it. The judiciary is separate. So what is happening is, even today, India is still carrying forward the same system that the British had. For whatever reason, they had some reason why they wanted, upper provinces to have something, and United Province, they called it, United Provinces to have something, central provinces to have something, and Madras and Bombay presidencies, they had a different set of rules. What is amazing is it carries to this day. And who is going to bell the cat? And I'll ask the question to both of you, starting with Dr. HemaHari first. who is to bell the cat? How are we going to reform ourselves?
Well, first, I think, we always have a five-step approach, and the first step is always awareness. So unless you have this awareness, and which, programs like yours can bring in, and by, getting people like us who have compiled this information to be able to share with a lot more people. So it is awareness both from the public as well as on the administrator side, on those people who can bring the change. See, today we are in a state of rule, which is a democracy where we have a defined system. So the people who are in the system have to know, and they should know that this is what the people also want. So both sides have to have this awareness, and it is from there that we can start. Then once you have this, and the people are in synergy, both system and the people are in synergy, then the way will automatically, the path will emerge.
It's actually a five-step approach that we have as to how it can be done. So, and then only can apply it globally too. So it starts from with awareness to application. So that is what it is. It's there in our site. So that is how it must be implemented. And see, after 75 years, it's now we've got a new criminal law from the colonial criminal law. Like this, there are a lot of overhauling that needs to be done system. Unfortunately, not done in the last 7 decades. Unfortunately, not done. So let's not cry over spilled milk. Lot of time we have lost in that. But when we're talking about new India, we have to look both inward and outward. It's only then possible. So a lot of course corrections have to happen from inside. At the same time, we see today Indians are strong because for the last 4 or 5 decades, Indians like you and probably people about 10, 15 years even prior to you have gone to different parts of the world. The Indian diaspora is there in about 160 plus countries today. So it's a might of the people that has traveled. See, this is not the sugar wave or the indentured labor wave that happened 200 years ago, what we call Girmityas. That's a different wave. That's a post-medieval wave. I'm talking about the modern world wave in the mid 1900s onwards. Indians have got all over. So that's added to the strength. So we have a vast base, both inside and outside. And we have to leverage this with knowledge. It's not a simple, easy task. It's a task that will take multiple decades to do. But I think today we are on a much stronger footing as a civilization to take it forward.
Thank you so much. And if I had my way, I would put you on the interview board of the incoming candidates, IAS, all the services, administrative services, to understand. See, they have a system that everybody ratmarifies and comes. My recollection is 40 years ago, 30 years ago, whenever my classmates used to sit for the administrative services exams, they used to take history, civics, and something else, some crazy combination. He said this is the easiest way to get a high rank in the exam. Once you get the exam, you get higher rank. Then the interview, they would prepare for it separately, and what they would prep for and what there is in reality are totally different. But they are considered the regional satraps. They are the emperors of the district that they are in. The district collector today thinks that he is the most important person there. So that satrapship, that I am the zamindar of this place, that still exists. They are. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but as a rule, the IAS amongst the administrative services, they think they are the king of the mountain, all because they got a better rank probably, and they scored well in their interview. Okay, so this is cognitive skills, cognitive intelligence. Do you have the social intelligence, the cultural intelligence, the civil intelligence? These are all required to understand what the other person is saying. So I see a lot of gaps here. I hope that people in the know, I don't know if the administrative services want to change or not, but at least we are definitely telling them you need to change. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and Dr. HemaHari and Dr. D.K.Hari. So we have a few questions from our viewers. Maybe we could take it now.
Sure, please.
Magnet Ranga wants to know, when Indian historians have also distorted Indian history, wouldn't it be authenticating the distorted version of the world? Both of you, one of you can start first and the other can add on.
When Indian historians have also distorted Indian history too, wouldn't it be authenticating the distorted version of the world?
See, if there's distortion in one place, it's got a ripple effect everywhere. See, actually, if you look at the post-colonization of the world, more than a few countries, they try to write the history of their country after the colonists left. They did. Some of them really tried. How much they succeeded is a different issue. But in India, we refuse to even appoint a committee or a board to give it a try. We just continued the formula. So we knew it was distorted, but just continued with it without giving it a try to change. So these are two perspectives. And as you say, the old saying always say, the victor always writes a history. In a forest, it's the lion history that is written. So that's way. So that's how it is. So distortion is all over.
And it is definitely a distorted version of the world history, because this current version of the world history, because of this James Mill Charles Grant of idea of suppressing Indian contributions and the richness of the Indian knowledge and the contributions of India to the world, both in the realms of matter and mind, they have largely been ignored. They don't figure anywhere in world history. And we actually conduct courses on just this aspect, Indian contributions to the world, and we split it into realm of matter and realm of mind. Because when we go through that, you will realize how India has been a game changer for world history. And the world as we know it as of today, with whatever baggages we have today, has largely been influenced by everything from India. And the world was actually India centric. Everything that has happened in world history, as we read today, if you look at it, the root would be somewhere or the other a need for contact with India, things from India, knowledge from India. And of course, how they used it and then how it took shape and branched out is a different story. But then this has been the root, and unfortunately, this is not acknowledged anywhere. And therefore, even Indians don't know and don't have the pride, and we are unable to break out of this shell and come out.
So when you talk about distortion of world history, we look at world history per se written in the last couple of centuries. They speak about Greek, Roman, and Egyptian. At best, the farthest east they would go is Mesopotamia, and a stray mention about China. And this deafening silence about Indian civilization, Indian contribution to world history. But as Hema just now said, we conduct regularly courses on this internationally to show how that is totally erroneous, not just distorted, totally erroneous. Many things, both in the realm of matter and mind, have been substantially contributed from India through the ages, and repeatedly, not one, hundreds and hundreds of things have helped shape the world. That's what we bring out.
And it's not just during the colonial era, it is many millennia prior to that as well. These contributions go back many millennia prior to the colonialization of the world. So the contributions have been running since then. It's a continuous train of contributions. Yes, and it is definitely a very sad distortion of world history that we know today. The world knows today. The world needs to know. So when we say awareness, it's not just awareness in India, it's awareness to the world as well, as to help them ask questions as to why are we doing certain things like this? Where did we get these ideas from?
So it is not important. It's not sufficient to say that yes, it's been distorted. We have also got to give the correct picture. That's what we do in our courses. So one, to say yes, it's distorted, we don't stop there. Then what is the right picture? That we have to give with facts and figures, with visuals like this, which is what we do.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dinesh Kumar, for your generous greetings. Maithili wants to know, Namaskarams, Dr. Hari. I think to both Haris, the colonized mindset is still present and the system remains the same. The questioning mind is no more there in our youngsters.
True. See, that's why she used the word that we have been like sheep in a pen. and not asking questions. Very important to get back the questioning minds, because if you look at our civilization thought, right from the very beginning, the Vedas, what we say, is what? The Rishi questioning Prakriti nature. What is Upanishad? The student questioning the teacher. What is Ramayana? Valmiki asking a question of
Narada.
Narada, Sant Narada. What is Mahabharata? Questions being asked of Krishna Dvapana, of Vedavyasa. What is Bhagavad Gita? Again, questioning being asked by Arjuna of Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
The way around.
Hmm?
The way around. Both. Yeah.
So, like that, every step. What does Buddha say about? He says about question and don't accept the answer I give. Check it like how you check gold on a touchstone. Everybody speaks about the importance of asking questions repeatedly. That is what our civilization is made up of. And if you look at much of Bharata chemistry, which we call Rasayana, what is it all about? It's all about dialogue between Shiva and Parvati, of questioning each other. Look at the beauty of it. So much of Rasayana is all about, starts from questioning. The whole chemistry of not just our body, not the chemistry that we learn in the subject chemistry in schools and colleges, but the chemistry of the world, chemistry of the galaxy, chemistry of the universe. All that is discussed. So everything is chemical reaction. Our body itself is so, the earth itself is so. So all the so questioning is a very important aspect, and that is what we need to re-inculcate back in the people. So when you have questioning, questioning comes out of a sense of dare.
So even when we teach, we have to make sure that the teaching goes in the form of a question. So you seed the question in the audience mind, in the student's mind, and then you give the answer. So that will then get assimilated better. Rather than just state facts, you seed a question and then give the facts and data to support as an answer to that question. So this is how we have to slowly start inculcating the questioning mind and the spirit in youngsters, and also ensure that it gets assimilated.
Next question from Manav San. It seems that the left are busy heaping venom on Hindus because they themselves are ideologically bankrupt and without any solutions for society. How do we show them the mirror and get them to introspect? The left.
Questions. That is why we placed how the left, where the left idea comes from in that sequence, that four-step sequence we showed you, all the left historians, where they get their ideas of history from, because they get it from Marx, who gets from Hegel, who gets it from James Mill. So that's the whole topic, as you said, how it's all joined at the hip. So once, see, when you need to untangle something, you need to know where the tangle is and go and untangle there. Quite often we don't even know where the tangle is. So it's through in interviews like this, through our research, we have to come up and say where the entanglement is. So we have to show it to them itself, why they are entangled, where they are entangled, and help them untangle themselves. Again, we're asking questions of them. And so that's a process. So it's an intellectual process, it's a long process. It doesn't happen in one interview, or it doesn't happen in 1 year. It's a multi-decade effort, because mind you, the entanglement happened over multi-decades. We cannot deny that. The entanglement per se didn't happen in one particular paper or one particular talk or one particular interview. It happened over decades of effort. So the untanglement also will take decades, and we should have the patience to do it. Only then you can really become a new India. You can go towards the state of Vishwaguru. But it's a long process, and it's not a 100-meter dash. It's not even a 1,000-meter steeplechase. It is a marathon. And it's the strength and the tenacity of a marathon is required in this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hari. Dr. Hari. Oh, you wanted to add something? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just very small point. So when you look at that route and you show that it is going to James Mill and his version, and if you're able to show why that version was created also, it's not that that version is correct. Unless you show why that version was created, you cannot show that it is a false version. So we have to show that why this version was created, for which we have enough data currently today in India and also outside India, collected by a lot of people who have been collecting records actually from British history, British records itself, like people like Dharampalji and so on. So these can show why Mill's version is wrong, and hopefully that will then help open the eyes.
It should.
Thank you so much, and
Thank you
a
so much.
wonderful session.
And
My voice is echoing. I don't know why. But thank you so much. And viewers, we are going to be having Dr. HemaHari and Dr. D.K.Hari again next week, same time, same place. We're going to be talking a new topic. And please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Please also give by way of comments what you thought of this program, because this is something where I've taken a step outside of what I normally do. And we are trying to go down the memory lane and look at things and how things got distorted. In fact, I was reading about Matsyavatar, and in Matsyavatar, there is the Noah's Ark. See how things have been appropriated from our history, passed off as their own. So, a lot of stuff like that, you can go back and draw parallels. In fact, Virgin Mary is also another one of those things. So, very, very interesting stuff ahead for you. Please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much, Dr. HemaHari and Dr. D.K.Hari. We'll be back next week. Namaskar.